Living Longer, Living Better is your television magazine highlighting lifestyles, hobbies, sports, health, travel, people, and places in our community, and much more. Information, ideas, and knowledge that will encourage new thinking and provide insights into our community. Plus, sharing fun activities of all types, understanding options for financial well-being, and making life more enjoyable. Join us on the journey exploring the many facets of living longer, living better.
The Tuskegee Airmen made history in the military, World War II, and civil rights.
Welcome. We have the most fascinating program for you this evening. I want to introduce to you the Tuskegee Airmen who were kind enough to come on. They are such distinguished individuals. We have Lieutenant LeRoy Gilliad, and we have Captain Les Williams. And thank you both for being here. It is an honor to have you. We were talking off camera about the fact that could it really be 66 years ago that they were so critical and so vital to the World War II effort, and they said no. It seemed to just pass like that. So starting with you, LeRoy, tell our viewers a little bit about you.
In January 1941, I was not aware that the Army Air Corps had made an announcement. It was going to allow blacks to enlist in the Army Air Corps for technical training. But in March, when they started the recruiting, I became aware of it. And I was one of let's say 350 blacks around the 9 corps areas who reported to Chanute Field, Rantoul, Illinois for technical training. And we graduated in October, and by that time there were only 286 of us. So we were the first blacks who actually completed the training and now to form the 99th Pursuit Squadron. Mm-hmm. And that was my first experience. Now, at that age, I was 21, born and raised in Midtown Manhattan, where the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts is located, in a low economic black and Irish neighborhood in a, I'll say, middle class and upward Christian and Jewish community with very little racial segregation. But now I began my experience for 9 years of racial segregation in the United States in both North and South. Mm-hmm. And that has left naturally a very indelible impression on me about this is America, and this is what I had to now, as an adult, endure.
Exactly. And Les, I'm sure you had a similar experience.
I did. I grew up in San Mateo. I was born in San Francisco, but I grew up in San Mateo. And although prejudice was more prevalent down south, it was definitely here in the north, you might say, mm-hmm. in San Mateo.
And when I read about the fact that it took until 1948, you're talking after everything's over, that they started to say, who was it? It was President Truman said, now we are going to have integration. I mean, and the fact that the president's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt at the time, went up and flew with one of the Tuskegee Airmen and went back. No, she didn't?
No, that's not at all.
What was that?
Because the point that people don't realize, this is called the Tuskegee Aviation Experiment mm-hmm. of blacks in civilian and military aviation.
Right.
And then in starting the war with the rattling of the saber by the Nazis, they're going to expand the Army Air Corps.
Right.
And in doing that, the first thing they were going to do was use a civil pilot training program. And in that program, she was a member of the board at Tuskegee Institute and mm-hmm. went there for a fundraising thing. And while there, she went on an airplane in the civil pilot training program and took a flight with the chief black pilot.
Right.
And therefore, that's how that started. She was never with the military. This was civilian.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. No, on the DVD, they were very succinct about the fact she did go up with the captain.
You were in a civilian pilot training program, not the military.
Right, but she did go back to report to her husband.
Well, the idea was that the FBI or the Secret Service was trying to get the president to recognize that this would be dangerous because the War College already indicates black couldn't fly. We had several hundred blacks who could fly, and this was one of the top black pilots at the time. But she had her mind, as most women do, and she asserted herself and went with him. And then she gave not the okay, but she said she saw no reason why we couldn't continue the training.
And I understand that there was an uprising at one of the officers' clubs where you were demanding to be integrated.
Yeah, that is true. There was one among the bomber pilots, chiefly, at a field that was at that time dedicated to training or furthering the training of the bomber pilot students. Mm-hmm. And they labeled it a mutiny.
Yes.
And
was it Freeman
Field,
Field mutiny?
That did take place. It was about the most meaningful thing that was happening at that time, because we were waiting as bomber pilots for our crew to be trained to supplement our cadre of men and go on overseas. We were very anxious to go overseas, but we had to wait until the prejudice, which had slowed down the recruiting of navigators and bombardiers and waistcutters and radio people. So I guess that was one of the things that was inevitable, that mutiny that occurred at Freeman Field in Indiana.
Well, I believe that if you're going to lay your life down, you should be integrated. You know, yes. It's not you lay your life down over here and, oh, by the way, they can go lay their life down. And I know that we have a DVD for a new movie coming out, or it's a trailer, actually. I always call it the wrong thing. But Red Tails.
Yes.
And I think that our audience would very much like that. And again, thank you for all of your insights.
Bandits! Hundreds of them! 6 o'clock!
It's got German markings.
Let's get them! Where are the damn fighters going? Is there anything left of our escort? Mayday! Mayday! Prepare to bail out!
Our boys are getting cut to shreds.
I need pilots who will put the bombers ahead of themselves.
When we came under your command, Colonel, you stated very clearly that we would never find Negroes who could pass a pilot's exam, make it through flight school, survive basic combat. We've done all of that.
I don't believe your boys have scored a single aerial kill.
It's damn hard to shoot down the enemy 100 miles behind the front lines.
What we do, how well we do it, does it matter?
And you all thought what?
You'd sign up, and that'd be the end of 100 years of bigotry. Get your head up, son. You're fighter pilots.
We have a right to fight for our country, the same as every other American. We will not go away.
I can't afford the kind of losses my bombers have been suffering. Can you help save lives?
If you get us new planes, we can help your boys.
Nothing's difficult.
Everything's a challenge.
Through adversity to the stars.
From the last plane to the last bullet to the last minute to the last man, we fight.
We fight.
We fight.
We fight.
We fight.
We fight.
At all costs, you protect the heavies.
Pilots, 4 o'clock. Stay with the bombers.
One bomber, that's 10 men. We count our victories by the bombers we get to their targets. By the husbands we return to their wives. By the fathers we get back to their children.
Yes, sir. Come on, Junior, fail!
Well, that was absolutely amazing. That trailer is if the movie's anything like that, it looks like you might be finally getting the just dues and the accolades that you deserve. You deserve. You helped to keep this country free. It's what it is today by people that were out there fighting to keep it that way. It just doesn't happen.
That's true.
So true. So, Lieutenant, I want to thank you for coming. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yes. When you mentioned we need to back up some of the what was called a mutiny, it's very significant to recognize that the key positions in the organization in the bomber group was held by white officers. disallowing the blacks from elevating. And it was a revolving door situation for them to get promotion. The commanding officer of the 1st Air Force and commanding officer of our squadron was determined to continue with racial segregation. Therefore, they used the officers' club for whites only and took a non-commissioned officers' club and made that club number 1 for the black officers. And we were supposed to sign a regulation that we would indicate that we'd use just those facilities designated for the trainees and for the supervisors. And under that was black and white. And as a consequence of that, everyone did not accept that. So 61 officers, there are more than 61, but 61 officers were put under arrest in quarters for entering or attempting to enter the White Officers Club. Since that failed, they put out a base regulation 85-2 and indicated all of the facilities to be used by the trainees and those by the supervisor. And you were supposed to sign that you read and understood it. 101 officers refused to sign that, but before they were ordered to sign it, they called their commanding officer before a board of officers and given a direct order by the legal officer to give the black officer a direct order to read and sign this regulation, which was a Jim Crow regulation to segregate yourself. 101 refused to do that, and the next day they were sent back to their old field, Godman Field, and incarcerated. And the night before that, Roosevelt died. We didn't know he was a racist too, but we thought something would happen. When I came to my turn and I refused, I can remember at that particular time I almost cried, but my wife and my first son was on the compound, and I felt that at least my son would have felt that his father stood for something.
And less. I don't know how you're going to follow that.
That's true. It makes it very hard, but yet still the core of the argument is in what he just said.
Yes.
It was a definite effort by the white officers to separate us, and you have some seemingly logical reason for doing so. They never could uncover that seemingly illogical reason. But that was the basis of that mutiny. The mutiny really brought us closer together, and we fought harder. But really to no avail, because 60 plus years have gone by since we have experienced total integration, or even close to it.
And I do thank you both for being here, and so sorry for the injustices you've suffered. Sometimes through that suffering come good things.
The nonprofit national organization Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated exists primarily to motivate young Americans to become participants in our nation's society and democratic process. It also supports young men and women pursuing excellence, paying special attention to those interested in aviation, technology, and aerospace. They are dedicated to keeping alive the history, achievements, and importance of the original Tuskegee Airmen. Call your local chapter for events, membership, and underwriting opportunities. The aircraft carrier USS Hornet Museum is a national treasure, having participated in 2 of the greatest events of the 20th century, World War II and the Apollo 11 manned space mission. Now peacefully moored at the historic Alameda Point and San Francisco Bay, the historic USS Hornet is a timeless memorial to those who defended our American values and to those who pursued America's technological advancements.
Hello there and welcome. I have 2 more interesting, I'm telling you, this program has the most interesting people on it. And tonight it's retired Navy. I have Max Branscombe. Thank you for coming, Max.
You're welcome, Bobbi.
And Stephen Robinson. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I was fortunate enough to be on the Hornet with these gentlemen. They actually dragged me through it. That was quite an experience for these poor gentlemen. It was very, very interesting. And tell our viewers what your relationship is with the Hornet, Max.
Well, I was a Navy pilot, and my tour on the Hornet was as a ship's company officer. And I spent a 2-year tour there, and I flew, my only flying was the ship's only airplane was the mail plane. We called it the COD, Carrier Onboard Delivery. So I flew that airplane. But my primary job was in the Combat Information Center in the anti-air warfare officer, and I was also the radar piloting officer, and plus other duties that a normal ship officer does. So that
But
was.
That's a big ship.
Well, it's a very big ship. It was a first-of-the-line warship in World War II. But by the time I got aboard, why, it was on its last, it was in fact turned out to be one of its last tours before it was retired and became a museum.
Now, Steve, what did you do?
Well, I was a boiler tender on the USS Bonhammer Shard, same class carrier as the Hornet. The boiler tenders, of course, tended the boilers. And so needless to say, it was quite hot down there. I did a couple different jobs down there. The basic one I did was what they called water tender. So you watch the level of the water in the boilers. But I also did some interesting things like smoke watch, which was up on the island, telling the different fire rooms if they were smoking, because of course you don't want the planes to land with smoke in their face. And so I did that for a while, where I really had my most fun.
Well, it's a fascinating thing to be on there because the enormity of it, it makes you feel so tiny. And I remember, Max, when I talked to you about the first time, you said someone told you you had to go land on an aircraft carrier, and you were way up in the sky, and you looked down, and that tiny little pin that was little black square was what they expected you to land your plane on.
That's right.
So it gives you, when you're down there, you think, how could anyone think this is small as you look around? But how did you survive on that? Because it's very steely. I mean, it's very encapsulated.
Well, you get, it was huge, so you had no claustrophobia problem, because my stateroom was probably about the size of the set we're sitting on, or the three of us here. It was not very large.
Did you say you had no claustrophobia problem?
No.
I happened to go to the brig with you, too. That's a claustrophobia problem.
I didn't spend any time in the brig, Bobby, but except
good.
when I went down
well, it's
there
nice
with
that
you.
the commander doesn't do that.
But the brig was not one of the more popular places. But the hangar deck and the flight deck, there was plenty of fresh air, lots of food, and as compared to other ships, it was quite roomy. And, so it was very enjoyable. And there was, as far as life itself, there was everything that you would need was there, you know, a place to sleep, a place to eat, a store to buy things, and if you're ill, there was a hospital, and there was a laundry, and there was a bakery, and it was just had everything you needed, except there's no place to hang out and meet girls, and there was no no tavern or disco. But other than that, it was just like any American city.
Sure, just up on the flight deck with a little wind in your hair. Okay, how long were you out for? That's what I thought of the whole time we were down there. You took me down below in all the compartments that are, and it's very compartmentalized and very dark, and you go in and in and in and in. But
and down.
And down and down and down. How long were your trips or your tours? You know, I'm probably not using it right.
I'm not sure about the Hornets. We did 3, as we called them, cruises over off of Nam. Each line period is what they called each time the carrier was off of Nam. Varied, usually a couple weeks at the very least. We did one time when we spent, I think, it was 3 weeks off of Nam. The North Koreans shot down one of our planes. We had to go directly. We pulled into the Philippines for our relaxation. We were there 3 hours, and they called us back on. We went out to Korea, floated around off of there for about another 3 weeks, and went directly off to Nam again. So we were out there for about a month, a little bit more than a month, without coming back in the land. That was about the longest time we were out at sea. But like he said, it's virtually a little city. It's 3,500 men, that's including the air crew, and there's about 1,500 ship's company. The air crew adds on to that. And we had a TV, they had, we could watch movies, they had a radio, station with DJs and stuff. We could hear all kinds of music. If they weren't flying planes, you could go up and run around the flight deck so you could exercise. And it was very nice. That was the only good thing I got out of the Navy that I wanted was a carrier.
A carrier. Well, and how do you feel, just real quickly, like in a 30-second, 45-second synopsis, how do you feel it made you the person you are today?
Well, it basically made me grow up. This is one of the, as you can see, it's marked main steam line, 600 pounds. If this was the bust while you're down here, you're dead. Toast. In the fire room, they said we had 12 seconds if you got a minor thing to get up and get out of the thing, but you'd never make it. They say actually the safest thing to do is to go down to the bilges, because of course steam and hot air rise. They say that, we never had the problem, but they say that if you got a pinhole leak in one of these things, and you took and raised your hand across it to see where it was, it'd take your fingers off. So they said if you ever had one, you take a broom, and you could hear it. I mean, it would be just piercing, of course. You would see the humidity and stuff. You couldn't actually see it, but, and so that's that. I went out of high school. I didn't really have good grades to go to college, so I went to the, as I always say, the University of the Navy. But it helped me grow up. It changed my way of thinking on a lot of things. It made me proud of what I did, and if I had to do it all over again, I would do the same, and without any problems whatsoever.
Very good. And how about you?
Well, it was, of course, a long-time aspiration. I'd grown up watching the Tuskegee Airmen and the World War II movies. And I said, man, that's got to be a fun thing to do. And to actually get aboard this ship and actually do it was wonderful. And the senior officers, there were still some World War II guys left there. And the stories that they told were just, to me, marvelous. But the main thing was the responsibility you had. I showed you in the CIC when you were down there, I was the radar piloting officer, where you actually had control of the ship, giving the engine and rudder orders, and that was pretty heady for a country boy to sit down in the bowels of the ship and steer it. That plus just coming aboard the ship, and do I have another 10 seconds?
10 seconds.
I think every American boy and man and woman should be a Navy pilot for at least one tour. Okay. You'll view life differently thereafter. On either side of the scopes are the height-finding radars. And we had special radars up on the antenna, special antennas up on the mast that we could determine the incoming aircraft's height. And supposedly this is where the air control supervisor sat, but like everybody else, I mostly walked around. I found that if you walk around and carry a piece of paper, why people leave you alone. But
take long to find out.
Over here is we call this it's a vertical plot, and it's the air picture, and typically it was set at a 200-mile range. And you notice that behind it, you can get behind it, and the radarman would be behind there with a sound-powered telephone talking to one of the search operators here, and he would periodically, every 3 minutes or so, plot a new position. And see, this is written from behind, and then he writes backwards, and so that he's not standing out in front of it to write it. So he's back there, so you always have an unobstructed view. One day in the Sea of Japan, we had 55 overflights. There weren't 55 different airplanes necessarily, but they would go back and come back because we'd seen the same aircraft twice. But we had fighters from all the Air Force bases in Japan, any other carriers in the area, and everything. And so the board was all full of contacts. And then we could actually run out to the side of our bridge or go up onto the flight deck and watch them fly by. And so that was kind of interesting. During the Vietnam War, when we were on Yankee Station, since we didn't ever move anywhere, why, rather than having this being a moving plot, our guys actually drew in the coast of North Vietnam and all the rivers and then Hainan Island up here. And so that's why the Admiral hung out down here, because this is where it was happening.
Well, thank you both for coming on. I was raised by an Army lieutenant colonel, so they get you grounded. They definitely military ground you. But I thank you both for what you did out there, you know, keeping our country free, land of the free, home of the brave. I mean, I always say, you know, America is nothing quite like it. All you have to do is travel the world to find out just how special we have it. And thank you very much for coming in and sharing these moments with these gentlemen.
For more information on the USS Hornet Museum, call 510-521-8448 or visit the website at www.uss-hornet.org.
Today, Sotheby's International Realty, bringing new technology to a 200-year-old tradition while serving the San Francisco Peninsula, Silicon Valley, and clientele worldwide.